The Basketball Hall of Fame 60 Days of Summer is your chance to see your favorite basketball stars live and in person. Check hoophall.com for a complete list of all these exciting appearances and plan your trip today.
What a joy to have you with us today. Welcome home. It's nice to have you here.
It's been a long journey, that's for sure, from Brooklyn, New York. Anybody here from Brooklyn? Nobody here. I guess I'm the only one.
Nope, there was someone from Brooklyn. There's someone in the back from Brooklyn. There we
Okay.
go. Well, let's start with Brooklyn. What was the neighborhood like when you grew up? And a lot of kids playing, a lot of sports. Were you involved in a lot of activities?
A lot of sports in Brooklyn in those days, actually. I mean, silly stuff. Roller hockey. I was involved with roller hockey and stickball, of course, stoop ball, things like that. And it was always something to do. Never a dull moment as far as sports were concerned. It was always something. I lived right in, when you said Park Slope, for that reason, it was near Prospect Park. So it was always baseball fields in the park and football fields and things of that nature. So sports were abundant in my neighborhood as a youngster growing up. And that kind of led me to getting involved with refereeing one day.
Well, your family was obviously a remarkable family. Your dad, your brother, a lot of police officers in your family.
Yes.
Yeah, for many generations, or was your dad the first of that group?
Well, having police officers in the family, the word that I used most was yes, sir. Those words were prominent in my family. You never said no to my dad or my brother. My dad was not really athletically inclined, musically inclined more than anything else. A concert violinist, actually, and there's music in my family. But more importantly, my brother played baseball in high school and then went into the Marine Corps, played baseball, and then started refereeing before me.
But your dad was a police officer for many, many years back in the Depression. I mean, through some tough times in New York City.
Interesting times.
Remarkable man.
Yes. Well, I thought he was remarkable in a sense that he was a police officer in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. So it was always a joy to talk to him about Prohibition and 30s, Roaring 20s. And I remember as a youngster, I don't know if anybody here ever would see the program, The Untouchables, with
Sure.
Elliot Ness and things like that. I remember sitting with my dad one evening, and they were showing a feature on Al Capone. And the announcer said something. My father said, "No, it really wasn't that way." And I said, "What do you mean? Did you know Al Capone?" He goes, "Al?" So I said, "I guess you knew Al Capone." And he said he started in Brooklyn on longshoremen with the docks and stuff like that. So that was an era that my dad went through. And it was just a magical time. And then my brother came along in the mid-50s to 70s, involved with the French Connection and Serpico and things like that. A very fascinating time as well. But what was interesting is that when my dad was a police officer, it was a very respected job, unlike today, unfortunately. And the respect was that you wore white gloves, short hair. It almost had the connotation of if you were a police officer, you were almost the same as an attorney or a teacher. The respect factor was there. And as a youngster growing up in Brooklyn, if you were on a street corner and you saw a policeman coming 2 blocks away, you weren't there when he got there. You just went home. weren't supposed to hang out.
Sure.
So it was a respected career in those days.
And your brother, as you mentioned, Joe, was obviously a very important part of your life, not just as an athlete and getting you to the games, but he's actually the one who started you in refereeing.
Absolutely. He, as a police officer, the pay in those days wasn't such a great amount, and you were allowed to, quote, moonlight as a police officer. So he moonlighted as a baseball umpire, basketball referee to pick up some extra cash. And it was interesting. The phenomenon is that most Catholic high school games and public high school games in the New York City area in all 5 boroughs started at 3:30. So most people were civil servants. Either you were a police officer, a fireman, a sanitation worker, or a teacher. If you worked on Wall Street, usually on Tuesdays and Fridays at around 2:30, 2:45, everybody would say, "Where the heck is Bavetta?" Because I would sneak out to be able to get to these 3:30 games, jeopardizing whatever financial career I had for the passion of being able to referee basketball games. So it didn't really matter to me. It was a passion, but he instilled in me that passion. He refereed before me in the Catholic high schools, public high schools, Eastern League, which became the CBA, and then also he refereed in the ABA from 1968 to 74. So the influence was there for me, and he encouraged me. He said, this is a great job, you can pick up some extra cash, and so that's really what I did. I kind of followed in his footsteps, and I would say for the first 5 years that I refereed high school games, Eastern League games, I went through life as Joe Bavetta's brother.
Yeah.
No one knew me as Dick Bavetta. Everybody, thank God, everybody loved my brother. But it's interesting, I had a game here in the Eastern League many years ago. When I say here, in the New England area, it was my first game in the Eastern League, and it was with my brother. And it was in Hamden. And Hamden, I guess a suburb of New Haven, it was the Hamden Bix. And I didn't put the connection why they would call the Hamden Bix. Well, it turns out the owner of the team invented the Bic pen. So my first game, they decided to have a promotion and give out free Bic pens to anyone that attended the game. And of course, I make a controversial call late in the game against the home team in Hamden, and I left with pen marks in my chest and my head, all over the shirt. I mean, these people became ravaged and incensed and started throwing pens, and I called the commissioner. I said, can't we just have T-shirt nights? You know, give away gloves or something like that. We don't need projectiles.
Sponge night or whatever, exactly.
But even to a point, and this is a story some of my guys really haven't heard, I had a game in Hartford, and it was Hartford-New Haven, first year, third game, and late in the game, and I'm working with my brother. Late in the game, I make a call, and Hartford is winning by 1 point. Hartford player comes down, pump fakes under the basket, and now goes up for what it would appear to be the winning basket, and I blow my whistle. Everybody in the Hartford in the arena thought that I had a foul on a play, score the basket, put the guy in the line for one shot, but I decided to come up with a traveling violation to nullify the basket. And my brother comes running in with this incredulous look on his face, like, you got to be kidding me to make this call with 5 seconds to go in the game. And he gets the ball and he runs to the sideline. He said, put this ball in play and let's get out of here as fast as we can. We put the ball in play, and in those days you would change in the home team locker room. Well, the home team just lost on this call. So we go into the locker room, and we're in the coach's glassed-in room, and people are banging on a door very transparently and things like that. And a guy holds up a sign, pool reporter. So we have to let him in. He comes in and he said, I just need an explanation for this final call. That's got to be a crazy call at that stage of the game. And my brother said, I'll answer that because I'm the crew chief and I'm in charge. He said, the player shuffled his feet 4 times. It was a travel twice, and it was absolutely the right call. And the reporter said, and your name, sir? He said, my name is Dick Bavetta. He said, well, who made the call? Joe Bavetta made the call, and pointed to me. So when he gets a phone call 3 days later from the commissioner, he said, Joe, thank God you were the one that made the call and not your kid brother, because he doesn't know what he's doing. It's only his 3rd game. So my brother covered for me all these years. It's amazing.
Isn't that a remarkable story?
It is. I think it is, yeah.
Well, how did, you have 2 respectable people in the family, your dad, your brother, both police officers. How did you end up on Wall Street? What happened?
It actually came about after I got out of college and things like that, just looking for a job, dumb luck, and Solomon Brothers was the #1 firm on Wall Street, and I happened to know someone who worked there. They were looking for someone with an accounting background, which is what I had, and I went to work for them. And in those days, actually, most of the brokerage firms and banks and corporations in New York City, and for that matter across the country, had employee programs. So there was bowling leagues and softball leagues and basketball leagues and stuff, and I was decent as a player. But in a company league, I was more than decent. I was a little bit better.
Sure.
So all of a sudden I found that the real reason I went to work for Solomon Brothers, I went there on a basketball scholarship, really, to a brokerage firm. And we played at the Downtown Athletic Club and won a couple of championships. So as long as we won games, my job was secure.
Absolutely. So I understand you showed up for a game and you played in like a doubleheader. You played in the first game.
Absolutely.
Your brother's partner did not show up for the second game, and he kind of said, come on, Dick, referee this game with me, and that's really was your first game working with him?
Yeah, he said to me, listen, I'm taking you home. You were going to wait for me while I refereed the second game. The other guy didn't show up. I'd rather not do it by myself. Come on. I said, I don't know anything about referee. I've never refereed. I just really don't know that much about refereeing. He said, welcome to the club. Neither do I. Come on, both of us go out there and do the best that we can. So it became an interest to me, and then he pushed me that particular year to apply for IABO in Brooklyn, New York, and take the test and become a referee.
So this began quite the journey. You're working through those local corporate games and high school games and athletic league games, and then up and finally into the Eastern League and the CBA. For years you're working these games.
Yeah, I think the message, if there is a message to everyone out there, young and old really, is that you have to prove people wrong. I was very blessed to have a brother that preceded me and had the contacts to get me in the door, let's say, but you still had to perform when you were there. And his contact for me was Eastern League. He was in the Eastern League. He knew the commissioner of the league and convinced him that I was very, very well experienced when in fact I had never refereed a game. And the thing was, we traveled together, and I always did games with my brother. And I know I had a game by myself one year, and I go to Scranton, and it was a Sunday night, and usually the games were over by 10 o'clock. You get in the car, you drive back. I'd hit Brooklyn maybe about 1 a.m., get my clothes out for the morning, take a shower, get dressed, and go to Wall Street and be into work at 6, not even sleeping. So this particular night that I have a game, I come out and I look, and it had snowed unmercifully during the entire evening, almost like the snow that you guys had this year in this New England area and things like that, just a heavy-duty snowstorm. And I'm the last one out, and I look and I see a car pulling out of the parking lot, and I think that it's a player or a coach or somebody, and all I want to do is get back to Route 80. Once I get to Route 80, it's usually cleared, and I can head back to New York. So he's out of the parking lot, this gentleman, and at the time I thought it was a gentleman. I really didn't know who it was. So I follow him. He goes a little faster. I go a little faster. He slows down. I slow down. He makes a right turn. I make a right turn. He makes a left turn. And then finally he stops, and I'm right behind him. And as he's getting out of the car, he's got this baseball bat in his hand approaching me. And he's like smacking the baseball bat in his hand. And he says, roll down the window. And I said, you got to be kidding me. What's the problem? He said, the problem is you've been following me. I said, I'm trying to get to Route 80. He said, you're in my driveway. You followed me home. So I knew then and there that being in the Eastern League in the wintertime is not the most advantageous way to earn your stripes, so to speak.
So you did years and years of this, and you tried out for the NBA several times.
That's what I was saying, actually, Paul, is the fact that I tried out for 9 years to get into the NBA, and as recently, 1974 was the last year that I tried out that I didn't make the NBA. And to give you an idea how fickle the whole business was, is in 1974, I went to Lakeland Junior College in Cleveland, and the letter I got from the NBA said, you are one of 10 officials that we have selected from the entire country, and we will take 3 out of the 10 at this camp. So come to the camp, try out, do the best you can, and we'll take 3 we feel are the best officials. I was not one of the 3. I was hired the following year in 75, the only one that was hired in 75. And at the end of the 75 season, 2 of the 3 people that were picked over me in 74 were fired. So most of us had these other jobs. You made $200 a game, 82 games, you know, 16,400. I made much more than that on Wall Street. So we all, whether people took up part-time teaching or worked for Western Electric or whatever, everybody had that. But the message for me was, and my brother was so instrumental, because people would say to me, well, what happened? How come you didn't make it this year? Or what's the problem? And I said, I really don't know. If you really want to know, check with the NBA. They're the ones that make the decision. So it was always a high approach for me that if the people who make the decisions feel that I'm not worthy of doing something, I'm not going to complain about it. And that's the message that we want to send out to the youngsters here, that you need to prove people wrong. And I prove people wrong, so to speak, by continuing to work at my craft, get better at it, not complain about it, but at the same time try to get better. And as luck would have it, when I made it in '75, a gentleman who will be honored here, Rod Thorne, became the director of officiating as well as basketball operations. And I had a conversation with him, and at this time I had moved along in the ranks in the NBA, and he said, you know, I use you as an example every time a referee on our staff comes in and wants to know why I'm not working the playoffs, how come I only went to the first round, why is it I don't go to the second round, how come I'm not working the finals. And I say to them, be like Dick Bavetta. Go about your business, prove us wrong, improve your craft, work hard, and good things will happen. And that's the message, to prove people wrong, and then by doing it by working hard.
Remarkable story. One of the things that you did bring to the table, certainly, once you made it to the NBA, was you dedicated yourself to a fitness regime that no other referees that I'm aware of were doing at the time. Can you talk about that transformation?
Yeah, that's hysterical as far as I'm concerned, because, you know, when I was trying out all these years, I would get a letter that you couldn't receive today because of human resources and, you know, how our culture is. You know, second year I try out, they said, you're not acceptable by our standards because you have a balding appearance in the letter. I said, well, I'm not going to go out and get a toupee. You know, it'll be just my luck. I'll call an offensive foul, and my hand will go this way, and the hair will go that way or something. I can't have that. And a couple of years later, they said, you have a boyish appearance and a frail appearance. And they were hiring guys 6'2", 6'3" in those days. And I wasn't working playoffs. I was lucky enough that the NBA allowed me to watch games on TV when I wasn't working, you know. So I was very humble about things, and I said, I need to start working out and to improve what I felt was an appearance that they weren't satisfied with. So I had never worked out before, and I went to a health club in Brooklyn, and this is March. My daughters are out of school in June, so I knew I had a couple of months before. We have a summer home up in the Adirondacks here in Lake George. And I knew I had 2 months to try and work out to improve my appearance. So I, without knowing that you're supposed to go every other day, I was going every day. You know, doing Nautilus this, lifting weights, all these crazy things. I mean, after 2 weeks, I was exhausted. I finally went to one of the instructors. I said, how does this work? And he said, well, first of all, you don't go every day. You go every other day. You need a day off, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, take off Sunday, Monday. And honestly, you have a problem. What you need to do is start changing the nutritional intake and start doing this and start doing that. And it's not something, I said, will I be noticed at camp in September? Not going to happen. He said, for you, it's going to take more than 4 or 5 months. So I said, I still wanted to do this. So I get my older daughter, Christine, on a Saturday, and I said, here's what we need to do. When I come out of the house to go to the gym, this fitness center, I want you to take my picture, and I'm going to have a bag, my gym bag. Take a picture, and come with me to the gym. I get on a Nautilus machine. I said, hold it. I take a cup of water. I pour it over my head. Yeah. So now I said, now take the picture. Yeah. Then I get on another machine, and I start doing the same thing, exercising. Then I get in the pool, and I'm going back and forth in the pool. And then she takes a picture of me in the sauna at the end of the day. So I decided to do like what did Dick do this summer? So I took these pictures, put it in a catalog, and sent it to the NBA, to my supervisor, Darryl Garrison. And under the pictures I put, sure, I'm smiling coming out of the house. I haven't started to work out yet. You know, this is my 100th lap in the pool or something. You know, so I exaggerated on everything. Well, I go upstate, and I get a phone call from the NBA from Mr. Garrettson's secretary, and she said, that catalog that you sent in was hysterical. The commissioner really liked it. Can we get another one? Well, I'm upstate now. I'm not near a fitness center. And I said, let me see what I can do. So now Christine comes up again. I get out in the backyard. I'm on the top of a picnic table with my legs spread eagled, and I have weights in each hand. And I put under that caption, I said, it may be a picnic table, but it ain't no picnic. Then I go into the woods, and there's a tree falling down, and I go under this tree, and I said, this is my early morning tree throwing contest. You know, so it made it seem like I'm picking up trees and throwing them. Then I go out on a lake, and she takes pictures of me rowing a boat and stuff like that. And at camp, when they introduced Commissioner Stern, and he walks down, I'm sitting on the end of a row. He stopped, he looked back, grabs my arm. He said, boy, you have been working out. So I said, I don't know if he's putting me on or I'm putting him on. I have no idea. But we got to continue with this fitness program.
Sure.
So I started, sincerely, I even every day I ride a little mountain bike in the morning for about an hour, go down on the lake and row for an hour and a half, and then usually in the afternoon I run 8 miles.
One of the days that fitness must have really come in handy for you was the day, I'm looking at Dennis Johnson up there, accidentally broke the leg of your partner.
Oh, yes.
And
yes.
you ended up working a game by yourself,
Yeah.
pretty important game historically.
That was a career-changing game, actually. It was in November of 1984, and a lot of people don't remember in those days that the rivalry was Philadelphia and Boston. Julius Erving and Larry Bird. Both teams were undefeated, and you know, I'm the baby in the group. There's only 2 referees. I'm with a veteran official, and we do the first half. And the start of the second half, Dennis Johnson dives for a ball, excuse me, dives for a ball, and crashes into my partner and breaks his leg. Well, we stop the game. They carry him off on a stretcher, and I do, you know, my plea to both coaches. I get Casey Jones and I get Billy Cunningham, and I said, coaches, listen, I'm by myself. I'm going to work for 2 men. I'm going to work as hard as one person can possibly work. But this is only going to be successful if I have your cooperation. Dick, you got it. No problem. Everything is fine. And I think Billy Cunningham had to say to his assistant, what's his name? What's that guy's name? Yeah, Dick. Yeah, they didn't even know who I was. Well, 4 technical fouls later, you know, thanks to their cooperation, it was only 4 technical fouls. Cunningham starts jumping up, and I say to him, if you do that one more time, I'm going to throw you. He said, you don't have the guts. Bing, bang, goodbye. So he leaves, and I go over to the scorer's table, and Andy Jick, I always remember Andy Jick was the announcer for the Celtics, and the scorer says, Dick, you're throwing him on 1 technical foul, right? And I said, no. The other official in the first half called a technical foul on Cunningham. And because I said, I heard it announced. He said, yes, but he come over afterwards and changed it to Matt Gukas. So Cunningham only has 1 technical. Do you really want to throw him on 1? I said, no. Let someone go into the locker room. Let's bring him back out again. So now they go in and they get Cunningham and they bring him back out again. And he's coaching. And of course, as luck would have it, Larry Bird has an unbelievable night. Every shot he took, Irving is guarding him. And as every shot went in that Larry took, he went further back. And he kept on saying to Irving, aren't you going to guard me? Can't you do any better? I mean, he was the greatest soft-spoken trash talker I've ever met. finally, it got too much, and I look up and I see them choking each other. And a melee ensues. And so I learned from my brother Joe that if you can't stop something before it starts, you kind of step back and take license plate numbers.
Yeah.
So I just kind of stepped back and watched what was going on. And in so doing, then I informed them that Bird and Irving were gone. Boston ends up winning by 15, 18, and the response, more so from the Philadelphia people, was that Cunningham said, I really didn't know that much about this guy Bavetta, but for anyone to have the courage to throw out 2 superstars, that says a lot for this man.
Well, how about a game in 2000?
And that was the first time and only time either one of them have ever been thrown out of a game.
2006, was it, against Knicks Nuggets? You threw out the entire, everyone who was
Yeah,
playing.
there's a lot of Bavetta rules, unfortunately, in the NBA. I don't know if that's a good thing. You've done your homework, you rascal, you. Yeah, there's a lot of Bavetta rules in the NBA. This particular one, it's at the Garden, and Denver's winning by a lot, and Isaiah was coaching, George Karl was coaching. And what happens is, somebody on Denver, could have been a follow at the time, goes in and does a spin back over the head dunk. And Isaiah thought that maybe he was showboating and embarrassing them late in the game. And I don't really hear him say anything, but I see him say something, calls a timeout. And the essence of it, I find out afterwards in the paper, is that if any other Denver Nugget goes in to do something like that, waffle him. Don't allow him to embarrass us. So, sure enough, with a minute to go in a game, a player does this. That's the game. Carmelo punches a guy. He ends up getting suspended for 15 games and things like that. But everybody was coming off the bench, everybody out on the floor, security, things like that. I couldn't tell who a troublemaker was or who a peacemaker was. And I'm with 2 rookie officials. And they come to me and they say, Uncle Dick, yeah, what do we do now? I said, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to throw all 10. And they looked at me and they say, what? I said, I can't figure out who's the problem. Why take a chance to leave a problem in the game? We're going to get rid of 10 problems.
Sure.
So I walked over to George Karl and I said, George, all 5 players that were on the court, they're gone. Are you okay with that? No problem here. Went to Isaiah. I said, Isaiah, your 5 players, they're gone. Are we okay with that? No problem here. I said, line them up. I said to George Karl, you line up your players. I now got the security. In Madison Square Garden, there is one exit. You go through this exit, left to the visitors, right to the home team. Both teams were going to have to go out, so I said to myself, this is my law enforcement training, that we don't want both teams going out at the same time. So I had a security guard stationed at the end of the hallway, and I said, when the hallways are secure in both directions, give me a thumbs up. So now I walk over to Isaiah and I said, it's time for your players to leave. I said, not yet. Visitors go first. So I went to George Karl. I said, George, your 5 players leave now. So it was like the March of the Penguins. You know, they're all walking off like this, one behind another, right off. Get the thumbs up from the security guard. Isaiah, same thing, March of the Penguins, they go off. I go to Denver a couple of weeks later. They were so thrilled with the way it was handled. And the office, the NBA office felt, was that a bit extreme? 10 players. And I said, were there any further problems? No. Was there any misapplication of a rule? No. Any feedback from New York? No. Any feedback from Denver? No. I rest my case.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting. Occasionally you'll hear or see or read about the malice in the palace, but you never hear about really what happened in New York with 10 players being ejected. So to the credit of the 2 officials I was with as well, It had nothing to do with the officiating, which is what we look for, and we were satisfied with the outcome.
If anyone has a question for Mr. Bavetta, we'd be happy to take them at that point. But a question from proving once again that we're a little bit crazy. Jalen Rose breaks your nose one day.
Yes.
You finish the game.
Yes.
And you refereed the next night.
Actually, it was a Tuesday night, had my nose operated on Wednesday morning, and refereed Thursday night and Friday night, actually up here in Boston.
How could you breathe? How could you do that?
Not very well, actually.
Yeah.
I did have a sidebar comment to it. The lady that did the operation was Susan Scott, the wife of Norman Scott, the orthopedic surgeon for the Knicks.
Mm-hmm.
And on Wednesday morning, I was in the hospital at 5 a.m. and she did microsurgery. And then at that point, she said, you need to take a few weeks off. And then I said, no, I have to work tomorrow night. And she says, call me tomorrow morning, Thursday morning. I'll let you know whether I give you clearance. So I answered the questions to the best of my knowledge. And she said, what time is the game? I said, 7:30. In Jersey, Brenda Byrne Arena. Yes. Can you be there 4:30? I said, I can be there anytime you want. She said, I have to take the stuffing out, the gauze pads. I have to take that out of your nose.
My goodness.
Because that's what made me think, because it wouldn't be able to breathe.
Yeah.
So she shows up the next day at 4:30 in New Jersey in a ski outfit. Her two kids, ski outfits, gloves, boots and stuff. And I said, what's this all about? She said, oh no, I'm on vacation.
Wow.
But I've always been a big fan of yours, and I just had to be here for you. And so it's interesting, because all of this you can't really put in a story in a limited time. The next night I go to Boston. Well, the interesting part about it is that my two partners didn't know, so they have Band-Aids on their nose when I go out. The entire Nets bench had Band-Aids on their nose. And Jason Williams, who was the captain of the Nets at the time, he had broken his nose earlier in the season. He has a Band-Aid on his nose. And so one of the players for the Charlotte Hornets comes out, and he's the captain. He said, what's going on? I said, you don't have a Band-Aid on your nose. I said, this is Band-Aid week. You have to, in order to participate in the captain's meeting, you must have a Band-Aid. He said, okay. So he goes back and puts a Band-Aid on his nose, and then he attends the meeting. And he said, so I see him later on in the game. I said, you could take the Band-Aid off. He said, Dick. I said, no, it's just for the first half, Band-Aid week, just for the first half.
What a great story.
Yeah.
First question, come on over. How are you doing? What is your name, and what is your question, please, for Mr. Bavetta?
Hi. What's your name?
Hi, my name is Brian.
Brian, a pleasure.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you for your service. You've been amazing to the NBA, and we all appreciate it. I know it's the hardest job, I'm sure, on the court, and you're never right. Someone's always, thinking you're wrong. But I guess my question was really just, I'm a huge Jordan fan. I was just wondering if you had any kind of standout Jordan stories or anything like that.
Michael was always a great question. Thank you, and thank you for your kind words. The thing I remember most about Michael is just when you would think that you've seen everything he could possibly do, he would always come up with something else. And just an unbelievable player. And when he would approach me in particular as a referee, he would kind of sidle up next to you, and he'd say, are you sure about that last call? And when he would say that, it did give me doubt. And I said, well, if you're asking about it, let me check it at halftime on a video machine. Maybe I shouldn't be so sure about the call. But I do remember a playoff game against Charlotte, and Charlotte had split the series in Chicago. Now they're back in Charlotte for Game 3, and I have that. And I call a foul on Jim Paxton, and he walks over to me as I'm standing during the administration of the free throws, and he said, I'm not really sure about that call. And I said, well, I'm pretty sure about it. That's one I know I got right. Now, Michael can't walk anywhere on the court without people seeing this. Well, now, as he's talking to me, fans in Charlotte are getting crazy. Everybody thinks he would get breaks in games and calls. So I said, Michael, do me a favor. You made your point. Walk away. And I walk away a little bit, and he follows me. And I said, Michael, let me put it to you this way. I'm going to walk to midcourt. If you follow me, I'll nail you. Mm-hmm. I walk to midcourt, he follows me, nail it. Well, Charlotte wins the game. The front page of the Charlotte Observer is not that Charlotte wins the game, it's that Michael Jordan actually had a technical foul called against him. And I said, and you see my picture of calling the tee, and I said, man, if I knew I was going to get on the front page of a paper, I would have called tees a lot sooner than this. So, but he was always a gentleman.
Thank you. Next, please. Your name, sir, and your question for Mr. Bavetta.
Derek from Walnut, California.
Derek, a pleasure.
Hi, nice to meet you. What team and what player would complain the most about not getting a call?
Well, first of all, they're probably too numerous to mention. It was a different era when I first started, and I think each team had someone that would kind of stir things up. Like Detroit, it was like Rick Mahorn or Lambier and stuff like that. With Seattle, it was Gary Payton. Each team had a particular guy. And I do remember I had a situation with Gary Payton in a playoff game in Milwaukee. And, you know, he had this way about him, how he handled himself. And I kind of gave him a look after I made a call against him. And his look was in disapproval. And I guess he didn't like the way I was looking at him, and he walked over to me. He says, I don't know if you know it or not. He said, but I'm from the ghettos of Oakland, California. And we're not afraid of referees in Oakland, California. And he starts to walk away. He says, whoa, wait a second. I'm from the ghettos of Brooklyn, New York. And we in the ghettos of Brooklyn, we're not afraid of players who try to intimidate. Now, be on your way. You know, so he kind of looked to see if he left. He left, so we... But there's a certain equalizer when you have the whistle in your hand, and he respected that.
GP always had a sense of humor.
Yes, yes.
Thanks very much. Next, please. Sir, your name and your question for Mr. Bavetta.
My name is Steve Carroll. I'm from Port Chester, New York, where I also understand you did a lot of your refereeing in your early years.
Yes.
Heard a lot of great stories on the way up.
Any of them true?
I don't know. But what would you say the changes are now as a referee in the NBA from when you first began in your career?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is that when I first started refereeing in the NBA in 1975, a blackberry was a piece of fruit that you had on your morning cereal. That is no longer the case now. With the NBA, you're on call 24/7, and I'm a computer challenge guy, but I always carried my BlackBerry, and in the middle of the night, I'm getting... Well, sometimes when you're alone on the road for a while, maybe the vroom, vroom, vroom is not so bad, but in any event, it's just a culture change. Players are younger, more energized, and have a lot to say. And it's just like anything else. If you're happily married, I think it comes about because you have selective hearing. And I try to use selective hearing when I'm with these players.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Right.
We probably have time for one more. Come on over. Your name, please, and your question for Mr. Bavetta.
I'm Chris Pinella, and I was wondering...
Chris, how are you? I like the shirt. Very nice. Let everybody see that, please. Okay. Thank you. And please let people know that I did not give that to you, right?
He didn't give it to me.
Right. It was mailed to his house 3 days ago, but other than that, okay. You're on.
I was wondering, what's the toughest game to officiate that you ever have officiated?
Toughest game, you know, I've had a few over the years. Some games, I had a triple overtime game. I had Phoenix at Chicago, went 3 overtimes, and that was a tough game. It's so bizarre how things turn out, and at Final Four weekend, I reminded Dikembe that I made him a cult hero, and he goes, Dick, what do you mean, cult hero? And I said, Dikembe, I worked Game 5 in Seattle. When you beat Seattle, when you were with Denver and beat Seattle, and you were on the floor, I handed you the ball so that, and he said, no, you didn't, which I didn't. You know, I said, I was trying to pull the ball away from you, and he kept on going, no, no, no. Yeah. But he became a cult hero, so that was a great game as well. Absolutely. So there's been a bunch of games over the years.
I want to make sure we have time for autographs. Remember, we have time for one more, sir? Yes, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Bavetta.
Yes, sir.
Tom Corbier, Port Chester, New York.
Yes, sir.
Good friends of Terry Fiorito.
Oh, my goodness.
All right, we have a special surprise presentation for you. You may have wondered what all these kids are doing with the same T-shirt.
Yes, sir.
Well, a cup of coffee and a conversation with Terry turned out to be a pretty big day for Port Chester. So we understand you did some of the Don Bosco games.
Many Don Bosco games.
Down in Port Chester, and
Yes,
that
sir.
was one of your starts. So once you come to Port Chester, you're a Port Chester favorite son. So
Wow.
today is Dick Bavetta Day in Port Chester, and we're presenting you with a T-shirt, and all of the children that came from Don Bosco, from Corpus Christi Holy Rosary Church, and the Carver Center, which used to be the YMCA.
Right.
We want to present you with a T-shirt today, and we have our committee here. We founded an anti-bullying committee because
Right.
we had a young girl in Port Chester who almost lost her life from being bullied.
Right.
So what we're doing is we're dedicating this her and to you. So if you please stand up, I want to call Mr. Carreri, Mr. Carroll, who are on the co-founders, and Dr. Charles Coletti on the committee of former superintendent of schools in Port Chester.
Thank
He's
you.
a good friend, and here's your T-shirt.
Thank you very much. Paul, let's bring the gang over here. Wow. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
It's quite a remarkable
Way to go,
thing.
gang.
Come on up,
Way to
gang.
go,
Let's
gang.
get your picture taken.
We're going to sign some autographs later on, and we'll do some stuff.
Sir.
Yeah, Port Chester, way to go. We'll get everybody. I'm not leaving until I answer all questions, believe me. Believe me, thank you.
We had a nice trip up there.
I heard, yeah.
You heard, right?
Yeah.
We got stuck with
Thank you. Thank you.
Before-
Just so you know, the group coming up here
Yeah.
was on a bus from 9:30.
8:30.
Well, I was going to say 9:30 to 11:30 and didn't move.
Yeah.
But the trip started at 8:30.
But just for the gang, one last question from me, if I could.
Sure.
So you got last April, end of March.
Yes.
My boss, John DeLeva, called you
Yes.
on the phone. What did you think when John called and told you you were in the Hall of Fame?
I thought it was an April Fool's Day joke because it was April 1st, and it just was beyond my wildest expectations. I didn't even think about the Hall of Fame to not think about the Hall of Fame, if that makes any sense. I was just happy to finish my 39 years with the NBA and walk away with my health and my dignity, and also with the memories of all these people here. And where I will say this, it's tough not to be emotional here. And the reason it's tough not to be emotional is that this is a journey that I started with everyone in this room, whether subliminally or physically, with people that have been with me, and names have just come up over the years that want to be here to pay tribute. And I should stand back and pay tribute to all of you for what you've done for me over the years, really. Thank you all very, very much. And thank you all here for being here. Thank you. I will say this,
Yes, please.
that when I try to explain these things to my wife, she says, I don't get it. You know, she doesn't understand. You know, like, I come home, she said, when you get a chance, the garbage. Now, just so one last thing, just so you know, when I set the Iron Man record on April 2nd in Madison Square Garden, that was 2,633 games, I come home, and on the garage door leading into the house, there's a caricature. And it says, "Congratulations, Iron Man." I don't really pay much attention to it. So I go in the house, I get to the refrigerator to take out some Gatorade. "Congratulations, Iron Man." So my wife says to me, "Did you look at the caricature, what I put up?" I said, "Yeah, congratulations, Iron Man. Look at it." Well, when I look at it, it's an old man, balding, with an iron in his hand and an ironing board, and ironing. She said, "So when you get a chance, do the wash and the dryer, because you know, you may be an Iron Man out there, but you're the ironing man here. So that's what I get from her. So,
Ladies and gentlemen,
thank you all.
Mr.
Thank
Dick
you all.
Bavetta.
Thank you.